Yeah.
that are working. Well, I mean, I think that's valuable for people because, one of the things that we think about a lot is just that remote setting, right? What does that look like now? We're leveling the playing field anywhere in the world. You can now have a meaningful technology profession doing good work at the highest levels, and that's one of those avenues for people now in this day and age where they can find it. I mean, I'd love to, and I know Tristan's burning to ask some questions, but I'd love to understand a little bit more, how you work with people around the world in that remote capacity, especially in these engineering teams. What are some of the tools? I know we talked a little bit about GitOps and your role within the DevOps spectrum and different tools and tactics that you use. Love to hear a little bit more about, I guess your technology stack as it relates to collaborating with others, especially in this sort of international setting.
Yeah. So three number that's like you can't do without tools. One,
sure.
Google Meet or something like Google Meet.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not really Zoom people. We're more Google Meet. And when I mean we're not Zoom, not like Zoom is a bad product. It's just Google Meet is more tailored towards what we do or what we kind of work with at Gigster. And then number two, Slack. Like everything Slack, right? And then three, Jira, right? These are the three top tools that make collaboration easy, right? So Google Meet for actually in-person meetings, team check-ins, team sync, sync-ups, daily stand-ups. Jira for the project to be properly organized, assigning tasks. In fact, Jira is probably the work engine of everything because without Jira, we would just be chickens in a barn, not knowing what we're doing, right? So, but Jira kind of like helps focus and put everybody in a tight lane in terms of scheduling, in terms of, understanding what you're supposed to be doing, your deliverables, and also accurately trying to estimate your level of effort on a week-on-week cadence. So Jira is probably the workhorse there, right? And then, like I said, Google Meet for meetings and Slack for like synchronous, like real-time communication. So these three tools are kind of like Gigster's core ecosystem. And I kind of like have borrowed that model in other freelance projects or personal projects I'm doing. And by the way, Gigster is such a beautiful platform that the way the projects are structured, you absolutely can control your time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like you can be doing a project on Gigster and doing something else and doing another personal project if you want, because it's not like a 9 to 5. You know what I mean? You just have goals, you have targets, you have objectives, you have tickets, and you just have to get them done before when you say you'll get them done. So you kind of like can dictate everything. Like you tell them what your level of effort is, how long it takes to get something done, and then when they put everything together in the sprint, point of view, everything just moves along day in, day out. So you can then in your schedule, slot other things in. So those are kind of like the tools, and those are the tools that like I use like every other day personally, even when I'm working in other projects and all of that. Yeah.
What about on the DevOps side? I mean, that's the communication, collaboration, business process side.
Yeah, DevOps. All right. So I'm going to talk on two things. So first is how it was done at Gigster, and then I could talk about, how I do things now. So at Gigster, they had this platform, one of the earlier engineers started out building, and his name is Simon. He was leading in the team. Eventually, then the team grew, and then they got someone more senior. But that's a side story. Point is, he started the project to kind of like unify the DevOps experience, right? So think about what you're doing at CTO.ai, but not as grandiose as what you're doing. That makes any sense? Yeah. But he kind of had that vision, right? So that's why the first time I saw CTO, I could instantly connect, because I was like, okay, I understand what they're trying to do here. So they DevOps was a nightmare. Like imagine having thousands of projects run by, hundreds of teams and different developers all trying to get everything into production for different clients who have different metrics and different styles and so on and so forth. It was a nightmare. So the HQ engineers, the engineers who were, working for Gigster at the time, had a plethora of services and a plethora of projects that they had to keep their eyes on and monitor and make sure they were on, up and running, 24/7. And it will give anybody a nightmare. And I don't care who you are, smartest person in the world, a nightmare. So they said, Deborah and Simon and a couple of other people, I forget their name now, they thought, okay, how can we unify and simplify this experience? How can we get engineers to use our technology, or rephrase that, our infrastructure, to get client work into the cloud, not just in the dev environment or staging environment, but even production environment for clients who are willing to pay for it. So they started out a project and they called it the GDE, which was called the Gigster Development Environment. And essentially it leveraged Kubernetes, Vault, Circle CI to be able to, automate everything with a command line tool. So we built a command line tool. I was actually one of the pioneering members who worked on that project to build that project. So I brought the Kubernetes experience there. So the point was, you would check out a repository, you would authenticate via GitHub using the GitHub token, and then you would type a bunch of commands which we'd already put together. And those commands would help you either build your image, push your, deploy your image, or, actually that was it. Build or deploy the product. So it was pretty much it. And it was quite simple. So you'd be a new developer and you'd finish doing your work, or a developer assigned to a new project, you finished developing your work and you wanted to, ship out the first version of it. All you had to do was get the GDE environment, or we used to call it the Gig CLI anyway. And then all you had to do was, Gig CLI build, Gig CLI push, and Gig CLI deploy, right? And eventually just became Gig CLI deploy, because that kind of encapsulated every other command in there. It was a great tool, was fantastic, it worked. It kind of reduced the ops time that the Gigster engineers had to work on, because imagine having 1,000 developers throwing projects at you saying, hey, we need to develop this, or it avoided developers from
that poor DevOps team, right?
yeah. Oh my goodness, those guys, I don't think they got any sleep. They were always bag-eyed, and it was really bad. But when they pushed the version 1 of it, no matter how it was a bit clunky and it didn't work exactly, but it was a version 1, and it kind of did the most basic functionality. And that's one thing I like Simon for. He was always, let's get the basic functionality out first and then figure out all the bells and whistles later.